Question 19. Page 24. Question 19. Bring out the Renaissance elements in Edward II, or in Edward II, Marlowe shows the woe of the Renaissance equaled its joy. Discuss and illustrate. Answer. Marlowe is a typical product of the Renaissance. Marlowe is a typical product of the Renaissance. Although in his play he deals with the time of Edward II, which is the first quarter of the 14th century, but actually the characters and incidents of his drama are touched with the spirit of the Renaissance. Marlowe imbibed in him all the aspirations and ardours of the Renaissance. Boas, B-O-A-S, Boas, in his Marlowe and His Circle, speaking of the urge of the Renaissance spirit in Marlowe, says, open quotes, the dramatic and lyrical genius that created Tamburlaine, Dr. Faustus, Edward II, and Hero and Leander is one of the marvels of the English Renaissance. In Florence or Venice, he would have breathed congenial air. It was fortune's crowning irony that this most Italianate of Elizabethan Englishmen should have been born and fostered under the shadow of the central sanctuary of the Ecclesia Anglicana, E-C-C-L-E-S-I-A, Ecclesia Anglicana, A-N-G-L-I-C-A-N-A. Close quotes. Marlowe incarnated in himself the exaltation of spirit that Renaissance symbolized. This spirit of the Renaissance permeates the play, although Marlowe adheres to the historical facts of the reign of Edward II faithfully. The Renaissance has varied aspects. It has its joys and woes. Edward II typifies both the aspects. Edward's approach to life is that of an imaginative dreamer of dreams of joy. Like Hercules doting on his favorite Hylas, like Achilles having his favorite friend Patroclus, the king must have his Gaveston. And after Gaveston is taken away from him, he must have Spencer Jr. to take his place. One of the pleasures that the Renaissance held up before the romantic enthusiasts of the age was this classical conception of friendship and love between man and man. Both king and his favorite are fond of pomp and glitter of life. Music and poetry is his delight, says Gaveston about the king. Gaveston's, rather Marlowe, imagination runs riot in describing the sensuous pleasures of the Renaissance when he plans to set up lovely boys in Diana's shape. In his open quotes, in his sportive hands an olive tree to hide those parts which men delight to see. Close quotes. Edward proves himself to be more a reveller in the sensuous joys of life than a responsible ruler of the realm. Both Gaveston and Edward reflect the glamour of the Renaissance fondness for splendour in their dress and wear. Mortimer complains that Gaveston and King, open quotes, flout our train and jest at our attire, close quotes. Gaveston wears a lord's revenue on his back, and Midas-like he jets it in the court. Alongside this picture of the joys of the Renaissance, the play shows its woes. Edward II illustrates the irony of kingship. Mortimer is the Machiavellian villain who contrives the situation in such a way that the events move towards the catastrophic end of Edward II. Mortimer casts away all moral values, lives in adultery with the faithless queen, plots with her the murder of the imprisoned king, The murder of Edward and the beheading of Mortimer that follows are but the dark side of the Renaissance. Lightborn, an artist in murder, is depicted to show villainy, which is an aspect of Renaissance. He is the incarnation of the woes of the Renaissance. Charlton, Charlton, Charlton rightly observes, open quotes, "What characterizes Lightborn is the horrid professional pride. Murder is for him a fine art. Murder is for him a fine art. He practices it with the nicety of the expert and with a similar satisfaction, and not merely for the reward." Question 20. Examine the opinion that Marlowe's Edward II bears the impress of the Renaissance in England. Answer. Edward II is a historical drama which deals with the first quarter of the 14th century, giving a picture of the troubled times of Edward II in the turbulence of the war between the king and the barons. Page 25. The fierceness and the brutality of the barons belong to the time which Marlowe deals with in his play. Gaveston, the defiant Frenchman, standing up in haughty disdain of the English nobility. Mortimer the younger, developing into a Machiavellian villain. The brutal Warwick, snatching away Gaveston to butcher him mercilessly. These are the characteristics of the unsettled time of medieval barbarism. The clergy are also opposed to the king. In Edward II, Marlowe brings out vividly the political intrigue, the friction between monarch and subjects, the helplessness of the king to enforce his wishes. It was a crude and feudal age. But Marlowe typifies the exaltation of spirit that the Renaissance brought in Elizabethan England. So the characters and incidents of the play are tinged with the spirit of the Renaissance. Marlowe, in writing of the age of Edward II, really gave a picture of, open quotes, the spacious age of Elizabeth, close quotes. Gaveston, for example, speaks more like an Elizabethan sensualist than a man of the early 14th century, when he deliberates how he will provide for the amusement of the frivolous king. Open quotes. Italian masks by night, sweet speeches, comedies, and pleasing shows, close quotes. He plans to organize pastimes in which satyrs will dance an antic hay with their goat feet, and Actaeon will peep through the grove. These classical allusions are the outcome of the Renaissance, which brought the knowledge of the classical myths among the Elizabethan writers. The revelries pictured by Gaveston were dear to the Elizabethan sensualist. The hatred of Mortimer Jr. for Gaveston, open quotes, for he wears a short hooded Italian cloak, and in his Tuscan cap a jewel of more value, and in his Tuscan cap a jewel of more value than the crown, shows the proud Elizabethan's envy at the imitation of Italian manners. The foreign influence and the foreign manners that came up for criticism in Edward II's time were those of France, not of Italy. But Italy and Italian influence were unpopular to Marlowe's day. Hence the, open quotes, natural anachronism, close quotes. Both Gaveston and Edward reflect the glamour of the Renaissance fondness for splendor in their dress and wear. Lightbourne is an artist in murder who boasts of his art of killing without leaving a trace of violence upon the person of the murdered. Open quotes. Lightbourne is trained in the Italian school of crime, a favorite suggestion among Elizabethan writers. Close quotes. Mortimer's career is conceived of in the light of the teachings of Italian statesman Machiavelli, author of The Prince. This is an example of conceptual anachronism. Marlowe refers to his own age when he makes Baldock say that he is only, within quotes, curate-like in his externals, but, open quotes, inwardly licentious enough and apt for any kind of villainy. Close quotes. Mortimer, gloating on his villainy, compares himself to a bashful Puritan. Bashful Puritan within quotes. Here Marlowe satirizes the Puritan and priestly class who annoyed the players and playwrights of the Elizabethan age by their hostility to amusements. The cry, open quotes, sent George for England in the Baron's and the King's mouth. Act 3, Scene 3, lines 33 to 34, is an anachronism. Close quotes. For St. George was not adopted as the patron saint of England until Edward III's reign. See also answer to question 17. Question 21. Discuss some of the anachronisms in Marlowe's Edward II, or what elements of the Elizabethan age do you find in Edward II? Account for the existence of these elements. Answer. See answer to question 18. Question 22. In Edward II, open quotes, Marlowe is conceived not with the state but as always with the individual. Close quotes. A quote from Levin, Levin. Do you agree? Give reasons for your answer. Answer. The statement of Harry Levin is true. The truth of it can be understood if page 26. If we compare Marlowe's Edward II with Shakespeare's history plays, the grand design of Shakespeare's histories is delineated through a series of lessons in ethics and politics. Richard II, which has a good deal of similarity in situation and characterization with Marlowe's Edward II, is a political play. John of Gaunt is the mouthpiece of English patriotism. Gaunt's brother, the Duke of York, is more concerned with the fate of England in the Civil War between the two cousins than with the personal predicament of his nephew, Richard II. In other Shakespeare's history plays, patriotic fervour breaks out. There is greater concern with the woes of England in the political rivalries than with the individual plight and fortune. But in Marlowe's Edward II, there is not a single speech on patriotism. No one is concerned with the condition of England. The barons and the kings are ranged against each other for personal domination. Characters are fired by personal ambition or hatred. The barons are annoyed with the king for his foolish attachment to his favourites. Marlowe is concerned with the fortune of Edward as an individual. He also deals with the characters of Gaveston and Mortimer as individuals responsible for the misfortune and murder of the king. Edward II gains an advantage over Marlowe's other plays in the fact that here sympathy is distributed over a number of characters who stand out prominent with their individual peculiarities. Yet the central character of Edward II is his main concern, and he dominates it from the beginning to the end. The play centers round his power and predilections, his qualities and infirmities, his ambition and agony, his fall and resignation. Towards the end, Mortimer as an individual emerges important as a Machiavellian villain. It is said that Marlowe points to the wretched condition of the state through Mortimer's complaint that Gaveston is the cause of the ruin of the royal treasury, through Lancaster's lament that the northern borderers have their houses burnt and their wives and children slain by the Scotch, but these are taken more as personal sufferings of the individuals than of the state. Edward II has the promise of the political drama, but insular patriotism was alien to Marlowe's outlook and temperament. He imbibed the broad humanitarianism of the Renaissance. This explains why individuals get greater attention from him than the state. Question 23. Examine the view that in Edward II, Marlowe is primarily concerned with the fortune of the king rather than with political issues. Answer. See answer to question 22. Question 24. Within quotes, Marlowe is the supreme master of the dramatic climax. Close quotes. Discuss the statement examining the scenes in Edward II to which you consider the remark might apply. CU Honours 2001. Answer. The climax of Edward II is reached in the fifth scene to the fifth act, which is known as the murder scene. Of the murder of Edward, Charles Lamb has written that it, within quotes, moves pity and terror beyond any scene, ancient or modern, with which I am acquainted. Close quotes. This may seem strong words when we think of Prometheus chained to the mountain top, or of Lear storm-tossed on the heath, but they are memorable as coming from so clear-eyed a critic. In any case, there can be no doubt that the fifth act of Marlowe's tragedy far surpasses the corresponding portion of that fifth act of the corresponding portion of Shakespeare's Richard II. This is partly due to a characteristic difference between the dramatists in the handling of their allied themes. Shakespeare's theme is to show how Richard's weakness and sentimentality bring about his own downfall. The purpose of the play would have been defeated had he awakened a reaction in the unhappy king's favour by a vivid picture of his prison sufferings and death. Page 27. This, on the contrary, is what Marlowe has done, and so persuasive is his art that our recollection of Edward's sins is almost effect in the contemplation of his long-drawn agony. In the variety of its situations and in the closely sustained dramatic interest, Edward II has, without question, the advantage over Shakespeare's play. Marlowe secures the sympathy for the hero only at the end of Act 4. The pathetic scene in the Abbey of Neath, where Edward and his followers take refuge among the monks, lead up to the yet more pitiful situation in Kenilworth Castle, where the captive sovereign is bidden to surrender the crown. He pleads that he may at least be king till night and wear his crown till then, and in words that recall Faustus in his agony, he bids the sun stand still forever in heaven. But at last he agrees to yield up the emblem of royalty, and with it he sends a handkerchief wet with tears, within quotes, and dried again with sighs, close quotes, which may move the queen to pity, open quotes. Thus, through ever-mounting stages of passion and pathos, the play moves onward to its superb climax in the last dread scene within the walls of Berkeley Castle. Here, the dramatist's genius has achieved its highest triumph in combining with extreme and painful realism that subtle poetic touch which keeps everything within the limits of true art. The unhappy king is seen in the dungeon standing up to the knees in mire and puddle, sleepless and starving, and with the added agony of the remembrance of past days of love and glory. Within quotes, tell Isabel, the queen, I looked not thus, when for her sake I ran at tilt in France. Close quotes. When Lightbourne enters, Edward is struck with presaging fear and sees tragedy written on the murderer's brow. He seeks to win his goodwill by the gift of jewel left to him, and by reminding him that he is a king though robbed of his crown. But all is in vain, and Edward, too feeble to resist, is barbarously done to death. Close quotes. This is from Boas. Marlowe does not possess the skill of presenting a sustained action. He reaches the ultimate climax of the action of the play by means of a number of scenes which do not hold together. They have, however, value as episodic crises. Many of these scenes have a climax within the limits of the scenes, such as opening scene which reaches its climax when Edward makes over the Bishop of Coventry to Gaveston, the quarrel scene between Edward and the nobles, Act 2, Scene 2, which reaches a climax by rapid steps in the banishment first of Mortimer and secondly of Kent, and which prepares us for the Civil War, the scene of the triumph of the king over his rebellious nobles, Act 3, Scene 3. Question 25. Analyze the death scene in Edward II, Act 5, Scene 5. CU Honours Paper 2001. Answer. The death scene occurs in the fifth scene of the fifth act. This is the climax of the drama of the murder of Edward. Charles Lamb has said, quote, "It moves pity and terror beyond any scene, ancient or modern, with which I am acquainted." Close quotes. The dramatist has brought the conflict to this superb climax of the murder of Edward in the walls of Berkeley Castle through the ever-mounting stages of passion and pathos. Here the dramatist's genius has achieved the highest triumph in combining with extreme and painful realism that subtle poetic touch which keeps everything within the limits of true art. The unhappy king is seen in the dungeon, standing up to the knees in mire and puddle within quotes, sleepless and starving, and with the added agony of the remembrance of past days of love and glory.